Welcome back where epic gaming lore meets peaceful rest. Tonight we venture into one of the most intriguing questions surrounding FromSoftware's masterpiece, is Elden Ring Nightreign canon to the main timeline? Over the next few hours, we'll unravel the complex temporal mysteries that connect the base game to its upcoming expansion, exploring how time itself bends and fractures in the lands between. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin this tranquil journey through the labyrinthine corridors of Elden Ring's chronology. In the shadow of the great Ear Tree, where golden light once promised eternal order, time itself has become a fluid concept, malleable as the very reality that the shattering tore asunder. The lands between exist in a state of temporal chaos, where past, present, and future blur together like watercolors in rain. Understanding whether Nightreign fits into this timeline requires us to first comprehend the nature of time itself in this fractured realm. The concept of linear time, so fundamental to our mortal understanding, becomes almost meaningless in a world where death has been banished, where demigods can fall into slumbers that last centuries, and where the very fabric of reality has been shattered and reformed multiple times. The lands between operate according to different temporal rules, ones that allow for simultaneous possibilities, parallel developments, and the coexistence of contradictory truths. When we examine the evidence for Nightreign's canonical status, we must first establish what canonicity means in a world where multiple endings exist simultaneously, where the actions of countless tarnished create branching possibilities, and where the greater will itself seems uncertain about which path reality should follow. The traditional concept of a single, unbroken timeline gives way to something far more complex and fascinating. The announcement of Elden Ring Nightreign sent shockwaves through the lore community, not merely because it promised new content, but because it appeared to take place in a version of the lands between that seemed fundamentally different from what we knew. The brief glimpses we've seen suggest a world where darkness has taken hold in ways that go beyond the typical cycle of day and night, where familiar locations have been transformed by forces that speak to deeper temporal disruptions. To understand Nightreign's place in the timeline, we must first examine the nature of time in the base game. The lands between exist in what scholars might call a state of temporal stasis, where the normal flow of time has been disrupted by the cosmic forces that govern the realm. This disruption began long before the shattering, rooted in Queen Marika's original decision to remove the rune of death from the Elden Ring. The removal of death from the natural order created the first major temporal anomaly in the lands between. Without the finality that death provides, events began to stretch and distort, creating loops and cycles that defied normal chronological progression. The Golden Order's attempt to impose eternal stability actually created a form of temporal prison where change became almost impossible and stagnation masqueraded as peace. This temporal disruption explains many of the seemingly impossible elements we encounter in the base game. How can ancient dragons still roam the lands thousands of years after their supposed defeat? How did demigods who died during the shattering continue to influence events? How can the tarnished encounter beings and locations that should have been lost to history? The answer lies in understanding that the lands between exist in a state where temporal boundaries have become fluid and permeable. The shattering itself represented a catastrophic temporal event, one that didn't merely break the Elden Ring, but fractured the very flow of time throughout the realm. When Queen Marika shattered the cosmic symbol that had given structure to reality, she didn't just create a political crisis. She unleashed forces that would fundamentally alter how time itself functioned in the lands between. The great runes that scattered across the realm carried with them fragments of temporal power, each one creating localized distortions in the flow of time. These distortions manifested differently depending on the nature of the rune and its bearer. Millennia's scarlet rot, for instance, didn't just corrupt space but also time, creating areas where decay accelerated beyond normal parameters, while simultaneously preserving moments of beauty and eternal stasis. Radahn's mastery of gravity magic created perhaps the most obvious temporal distortion, literally holding back the stars and preventing the natural progression of cosmic events. His defeat during the festival didn't just restore the movement of celestial bodies, it allowed time itself to resume its proper course in ways that would have far-reaching consequences for the realm's future. The underground areas of the lands between, from the eternal cities to Mogia's palace, exist in temporal bubbles that operate according to different rules than the surface world. These locations preserve moments and cultures that should have been lost to history, creating pockets where past and present coexist in impossible harmony. The technology and magic found in these areas often surpasses what exists on the surface, suggesting that temporal isolation can accelerate certain forms of development while freezing others in place. Understanding these temporal mechanics becomes crucial when we examine the evidence for Nightreign's canonical status. The expansion doesn't appear to take place in a simple after the base game's events, but rather in a parallel or adjacent timeline where different choices and forces have shaped the realm's development. This doesn't make it non-canonical. Instead, it represents the natural evolution of a world where multiple timelines can coexist. The concept of parallel timelines isn't foreign to FromSoftware's storytelling approach. The multiple endings of Elden Ring don't represent different possibilities for a single timeline, but rather different actualized realities that exist simultaneously within the broader structure of the cosmos. Each tarnished who completes their journey creates a new branch in the temporal tree, a new possibility that becomes just as real as any other. When we examine the visual evidence from Nightreign's promotional materials, we see familiar locations transformed by forces that suggest significant temporal displacement. The Academy of Raya Lucaria appears shrouded in darkness that goes beyond simple nightfall, suggesting influence from entities or events that operate outside normal temporal boundaries. These changes speak to alterations in the fundamental nature of reality rather than simple chronological progression. The presence of what appears to be a different version of the lands between in Nightreign doesn't contradict the base game's lore, it expands it. The realm's fractured state makes it entirely possible for multiple versions of reality to exist simultaneously, each one shaped by different outcomes of the cosmic forces that govern existence. The Nightreign timeline might represent what happens when certain outer gods gain greater influence, or when different choices are made by key figures in the cosmic drama. The role of outer gods in shaping temporal reality cannot be understated. These cosmic entities exist outside the normal flow of time, able to influence events across multiple timelines and realities simultaneously. The Greater Will's withdrawal from active governance of the lands between created a power vacuum that other outer gods could exploit, each one potentially creating their own version of reality according to their particular nature and desires. The god of Rot's influence, for instance, doesn't just corrupt space, but also time, creating areas where decay accelerates or slows according to alien logic. The Formless Mother's blood magic operates according to principles that transcend normal temporal boundaries, allowing its influence to spread backwards and forwards through time simultaneously. The Frenzied Flame seeks to burn away not just the current reality but all possible realities, collapsing the multiple timelines into a singular point of chaos. When we consider Nightreign in this context, it becomes clear that the expansion likely represents the culmination of one or more outer gods' influence over the lands between's temporal structure. The perpetual night that seems to characterize this version of the realm suggests influence from entities associated with darkness, dreams, or the spaces between realities. This doesn't make it an alternate universe separate from the main game, but rather another facet of the same complex temporal crystal that contains all possible versions of the lands between. The evidence for this interpretation can be found in the base game's treatment of time and causality. The ability to resurrect at sites of grace doesn't just represent a gameplay mechanic, it suggests that death itself has become a temporal phenomenon rather than a final state. The Tarnished exist in a state of quantum possibility, able to experience multiple deaths and resurrections while maintaining continuity of experience and memory. This temporal flexibility extends to other aspects of the game world. The way ancient ruins and technologies appear throughout the lands between suggests that past and present aren't clearly delineated. The eternal cities contain architecture and magical techniques that seem to come from multiple time periods simultaneously, as if different eras have been compressed together into a single location. The divine towers that dot the landscape serve as temporal anchors, each one connected to a specific great rune and the period of history it represents. When the Tarnished activates these towers, they're not just gaining access to the rune's power, they're creating temporal links that allow past and present to interact in unprecedented ways. The restoration of each great rune doesn't just change the current state of the world, but retroactively influences the events that led to the shattering itself. This temporal mechanics helps explain how Nightreign can be simultaneous, canonical, and different from the base game. If time itself is malleable in the lands between, then multiple versions of events can coexist without contradicting each other. The Nightreign timeline might represent what happens when the temporal distortions created by the shattering reach a critical mass, allowing darkness to achieve dominance over the realm in ways that weren't possible during the base game's timeframe. The recurring motifs of cycles and repetition throughout Elden Ring's lore support this interpretation. The Golden Order itself was built upon the ruins of previous civilizations, suggesting that the lands between experience periodic resets or transformations that allow new orders to emerge from the ashes of the old. The Nightreign period might represent one such transformation, where the familiar structures of the world are reformed according to different principles. The role of dreams and sleep in Elden Ring's cosmology becomes particularly relevant when considering Nightreign's temporal placement. The realm seems to exist in a state that blurs the boundaries between waking and sleeping, where dreams can become reality and reality can fade into dreams. Trina's domain of slumber represents one aspect of this phenomenon, but the implications extend far beyond a single character's influence. The connection between sleep and time in the lands between suggests that consciousness itself plays a role in determining temporal flow. When beings enter deep sleep or coma states, they can become unstuck from normal time, experiencing dreams that span centuries or accessing memories from times that haven't occurred yet. Miquella's slumber within the Haligtree wasn't just physical rest. It was a journey through temporal possibility that allowed him to explore different futures for the realm. The prophetic dreams that various characters experience throughout the game provide glimpses into potential futures, but these aren't fixed destinies. They're temporal possibilities that exist in a state of quantum superposition until observed or acted upon. The Nightreign period might represent the actualization of one such prophetic vision, a future that became real through the cumulative choices and actions of countless beings throughout the lands between's history. The influence of memory on temporal perception adds another layer to this complex picture. The way ancient knowledge and forgotten histories continue to shape current events suggests that the past isn't truly past in the lands between. It exists in a state of eternal present, constantly influencing and being influenced by contemporary developments. The ruins scattered throughout the realm aren't just archaeological remnants, but active participants in the ongoing temporal drama. When we examine the specific evidence for Nightreign's canonical status, we must consider the visual and thematic elements that connect it to the base game, while acknowledging the differences that suggest temporal displacement. The architectural styles visible in the promotional materials maintain consistency with the base game's aesthetic, while showing clear signs of transformation and decay that speak to the passage of significant time. The presence of familiar landmarks, altered by unknown forces, suggests that Nightreign takes place in the same physical space as the base game, but at a different temporal coordinate. This isn't necessarily a future version of the lands between, but rather a parallel development where different cosmic forces have gained ascendancy. The perpetual night that characterizes this version of the realm might result from the victory of entities associated with darkness, dreams, or the void between stars. The technological and magical elements visible in Nightreign's preview materials show both advancement and regression from the base game's standards. Some areas appear to have developed beyond what we see in the original timeline, while others seem to have reverted to more primitive states. This uneven development pattern is consistent with temporal distortion effects, where different regions experience time at different rates or under different influences. The creatures and beings that populate Nightreign's version of the lands between provide additional clues about its temporal relationship to the base game. The presence of familiar enemy types in altered forms suggests evolutionary or magical development over time, while entirely new creatures might represent influences from outer gods or other cosmic entities that gained power in this timeline. The way these beings interact with the environment provides insights into the nature of the reality they inhabit. The role of the Erd Tree in Nightreign's timeline becomes particularly significant when considering questions of canonicity. The Great Tree serves as more than just a landmark. It's a temporal anchor that connects different periods and possibilities within the lands between's history. Any significant change to the Erd Tree's state or influence would have cascading effects throughout the timeline, potentially explaining the differences between the base game and Nightreign's version of the realm. The possibility that Nightreign represents a timeline where the Erd Tree's influence has waned or been replaced by other cosmic forces offers a compelling explanation for the expansion's relationship to the main game. If different outer gods gained ascendancy in this timeline, they might have reshaped reality according to their own principles, creating a version of the lands between that operates under fundamentally different rules while maintaining connections to the original timeline. The concept of temporal branches or split timelines helps reconcile the apparent contradictions between Nightreign and the base game. Rather than viewing them as sequential events, we can understand them as parallel developments that exist simultaneously within the broader cosmic structure. Each timeline represents a different possibility that was actualized through the choices and actions of key figures in the cosmic drama. The evidence for this interpretation can be found in the base game's treatment of multiple endings. The fact that players can choose between fundamentally different conclusions to the Tarnished journey suggests that the lands between exist in a state of quantum possibility, where multiple outcomes can coexist until specific choices collapse the probability wave into a single reality. Nightreign might represent the actualization of possibilities that weren't directly accessible through the base game's ending choices. The role of specific characters in determining temporal outcomes becomes crucial when considering Nightreign's place in the broader timeline. The decisions made by figures like Queen Marika, the demigods, and the various outer gods create ripple effects that extend across multiple timelines and realities. A different choice by any of these key figures could result in a fundamentally different version of the lands between, one where night reigns eternal and familiar locations are transformed by alien influences. The evidence from environmental storytelling in both the base game and Nightreign's promotional materials suggests a complex relationship between the two timelines. The way ruins and structures show different patterns of decay and renovation indicates that time flows differently in each version of the realm. Some locations appear more advanced in Nightreign, while others seem to have suffered greater destruction, suggesting that the cosmic forces shaping each timeline have different priorities and methods. The magical and technological artifacts visible in Nightreign provide additional clues about its temporal relationship to the base game. The presence of familiar items in altered forms suggests evolutionary development over time, while entirely new artifacts might represent influences from different outer gods or cosmic entities. The way these items interact with the environment and characters provides insights into the fundamental nature of reality in each timeline. The linguistic and cultural elements visible in Nightreign's materials offer another avenue for understanding its canonical status. The way language, symbols, and cultural practices have evolved or been preserved provides clues about the length of time that has passed and the nature of the forces that have shaped development. Continuities with the base game suggest shared origins, while differences indicate the influence of different cosmic forces or historical developments. The astronomical and cosmic elements that govern both timelines provide perhaps the strongest evidence for their shared canonical status. The movement of stars, the phases of celestial bodies, and the influence of cosmic forces operate according to consistent principles across both versions of the lands between. The differences between the timelines appear to result from the ascendancy of different cosmic entities rather than fundamental changes to the universe's structure. When we examine the metaphysical foundations that underlie both the base game and Nightreign, we find remarkable consistency in the basic principles that govern reality. The relationship between consciousness and existence, the role of will in shaping reality, and the influence of cosmic forces on material existence operate according to similar rules in both timelines. This suggests that Nightreign doesn't represent an alternate universe, but rather a different development within the same cosmic framework. The evidence from character interactions and dialogue in both versions of the Lands Between reveals important continuities that support their shared canonical status. The way beings relate to each other, the principles that govern social organization, and the fundamental drives that motivate action remain consistent across both timelines. The differences appear to result from changed circumstances rather than fundamental alterations to the nature of consciousness or society. The architectural and artistic elements that define both versions of the Lands Between show clear evolutionary relationships that support their placement within a shared timeline structure. The way building styles develop, artistic motifs evolve, and cultural symbols transform provides evidence for temporal continuity, even as it documents the influence of different cosmic forces. The preservation of certain elements alongside the transformation of others suggests selective pressure from specific entities or ideologies. The biological and ecological systems that operate in both timelines show adaptations and developments that speak to shared evolutionary history. The way flora and fauna have adapted to different cosmic influences provides insights into the length of time that has passed and the nature of the forces that have shaped development. The presence of familiar species in altered forms suggests adaptive responses to changed environmental conditions, rather than fundamental breaks in biological continuity. The geological and geographical features that define both versions of the Lands Between reveal evidence of both continuity and change that supports their shared canonical status. The basic structure of the landscape remains consistent, while surface features show the influence of different cosmic forces and historical developments. This pattern suggests that Nightreign represents a different phase in the ongoing evolution of the same fundamental geographical entity. The temporal mechanics that govern both versions of the Lands Between operate according to principles that allow for the coexistence of different timeline branches without contradiction. The ability of consciousness to influence reality, the role of will in shaping temporal flow, and the influence of cosmic forces on the structure of time itself create conditions where multiple versions of events can exist simultaneously within the same canonical framework. The prophetic and oracular elements that appear throughout both timelines provide additional evidence for their shared canonical status. The way future events cast shadows backward through time, the ability of certain beings to perceive multiple temporal possibilities, and the role of prophecy in shaping reality suggest that both timelines exist within the same predictive framework. The differences between them represent different actualized possibilities rather than separate canonical realities. The ritual and ceremonial practices that define both versions of the Lands Between show evolutionary development that speaks to shared cultural and spiritual origins. The way religious observances adapt to changed circumstances, the evolution of magical practices, and the transformation of cultural traditions provide evidence for temporal continuity, even as they document the influence of different cosmic forces on social development. The economic and trade systems that operate in both timelines reveal adaptations to different cosmic influences while maintaining fundamental continuities that support their shared canonical status. The way value is assigned to different commodities, the principles that govern exchange relationships, and the methods used to accumulate and distribute resources show both evolution and continuity across both versions of the Lands Between. The philosophical and intellectual traditions that characterize both timelines provide perhaps the strongest evidence for their shared canonical framework. The way beings understand existence, the principles they use to evaluate truth and meaning, and the methods they employ to acquire knowledge remain fundamentally consistent across both versions of the realm. The differences appear to result from different cosmic influences rather than fundamental breaks in intellectual tradition. As we delve deeper into the question of Nightreign's canonical status, we must examine the specific mechanisms by which temporal branching might occur within the Elden Ring universe. The evidence suggests that major cosmic events can create divergence points where reality splits into multiple potential paths, each one equally valid within the broader canonical framework. The shattering itself represents the most obvious example of such a divergence point. The moment when Queen Marika shattered the Elden Ring didn't just create political chaos. It unleashed forces that fundamentally altered the structure of reality throughout the lands between. The various ways this event could unfold, depending on the specific circumstances surrounding it, and the responses of different cosmic entities, would naturally create multiple timeline branches. Each of these branches would develop according to its own internal logic, while maintaining connections to the fundamental cosmic principles that govern the Elden Ring universe. The differences between timelines would emerge gradually as the cumulative effects of different cosmic influences shape development in different directions. Over time, these differences could become quite pronounced, while still maintaining the essential canonical relationship to the original timeline. The role of outer gods in shaping temporal development becomes crucial when considering how Nightreign might fit into this framework. These cosmic entities exist outside normal spacetime and can influence events across multiple timelines simultaneously. The ascendancy of different outer gods in different timeline branches would naturally lead to different versions of reality, each one shaped by the particular nature and agenda of the dominant cosmic force. The god of Rut's influence, for instance, would create timeline branches characterized by accelerated decay and transformation, where the boundaries between life and death become increasingly blurred. The formless mother's dominance would lead to realities shaped by blood magic and transformation, where identity becomes fluid and hierarchical structures dissolve. The greater will's continued dominance would maintain timelines similar to the base game's Golden Order period. The possibility that Nightreign represents a timeline where entities associated with darkness, night, or the void between stars have gained ascendancy offers a compelling explanation for its distinctive characteristics. These cosmic forces would naturally create a reality where night becomes eternal, where darkness takes on substance and agency, and where the familiar structures of the world are transformed according to alien principles. The evidence for this interpretation can be found in the visual and thematic elements that characterize Nightreign's version of the lands between. The perpetual darkness that seems to define this reality suggests more than simple absence of light. It implies the presence of a cosmic force that uses darkness as a medium for its influence. This darkness might serve functions similar to the golden light of the Erdtree in the base game's timeline, acting as a carrier for divine will and cosmic order. The transformation of familiar locations in Nightreign provides additional evidence for the influence of darkness-associated cosmic entities. The way buildings and landscapes have been altered suggests not just the passage of time, but active reshaping according to different aesthetic and functional principles. The architecture visible in promotional materials shows elements that seem designed to channel or focus dark energies, suggesting a reality where such forces have replaced the golden grace of the original timeline. The presence of altered versions of familiar creatures and beings in Nightreign speaks to evolutionary pressures created by different cosmic influences. The way these entities have adapted to conditions of perpetual darkness, the new abilities they've developed, and the changes in their behavior patterns all suggest extended exposure to cosmic forces that operate according to different principles than those governing the base game's timeline. The technological and magical developments visible in Nightreign indicate adaptation to a reality where different cosmic forces provide the fundamental energy sources for civilization. The absence or alteration of Golden Order incantations, the presence of new forms of sorcery, and the development of artifacts that seem designed to work with dark energies, all suggest a timeline where different cosmic principles have become dominant. The social and cultural adaptations evident in Nightreign provide insights into how civilizations might evolve under the influence of darkness-associated cosmic entities. The way communities organize themselves, the values they prioritize, and the methods they use to maintain order would naturally adapt to the cosmic forces that shape their reality. These adaptations wouldn't necessarily be negative. They might represent successful evolution to thrive under different cosmic conditions. The religious and spiritual practices that emerge in timeline branches, shaped by different outer gods, would naturally reflect the nature and requirements of the dominant cosmic entities. A reality shaped by darkness-associated forces might develop forms of worship and spiritual practice that seem alien or disturbing from the perspective of Golden Order theology, but which serve essential functions within their own cosmic context. The question of whether Nightreign represents a future development of the base game's timeline or a parallel branch becomes less important when we understand the nature of temporal mechanics in the Elden Ring universe. The evidence suggests that both interpretations might be correct simultaneously, depending on the perspective from which the relationship is viewed. From a linear temporal perspective, Nightreign might represent what the lands between becomes after extended exposure to different cosmic influences reshapes reality according to new principles. The perpetual night could result from the gradual weakening of the Erdtree's influence and the corresponding strengthening of forces associated with darkness and the void. This interpretation treats Nightreign as a sequel to the base game's events. From a quantum temporal perspective, Nightreign might represent a parallel development that exists simultaneously with the base game's timeline, both of them equally real within the broader cosmic framework. This interpretation treats the expansion as exploring a different branch of possibility that was always present within the Elden Ring universe's structure, made accessible through the temporal fluidity that characterizes the lands between. The evidence from both perspectives supports Nightreign's canonical status, while acknowledging its relationship to the base game might be more complex than simple chronological sequence. The expansion doesn't contradict the base game's lore, but rather expands it, exploring possibilities that were always implicit within the original framework, while developing them in directions that weren't directly accessible through the base game's narrative structure. The role of player choice in determining temporal outcomes adds another layer to this analysis. The multiple endings available in the base game don't just represent different conclusions to a single story, they represent different, actualized realities that exist simultaneously within the cosmic framework. Each ending choice creates its own timeline branch, complete with its own future development and potential for further branching. Nightreign might represent the development of one or more of these ending timelines, showing how different choices lead to different cosmic outcomes over extended periods. The expansion could explore what happens when certain ending choices interact with ongoing cosmic forces, creating realities that couldn't be directly predicted from the base game's conclusion, but which represent logical developments within the established framework. The possibility that Nightreign represents a convergence point where multiple timeline branches intersect offers another compelling interpretation of its canonical status. Rather than being a single linear development, the expansion might show what happens when the various possibilities created by the shattering and its aftermath begin to interact and influence each other across temporal boundaries. This interpretation would explain both the familiar and unfamiliar elements that characterize Nightreign's version of the lands between. The familiar aspects would represent continuities that exist across multiple timeline branches, while the unfamiliar elements would result from the unique interactions that occur when different temporal possibilities intersect and influence each other. The evidence for temporal convergence can be found in the base game's treatment of causality and influence across time. The way ancient events continue to shape current developments, the ability of certain beings to perceive and influence multiple temporal possibilities, and the role of prophetic vision in shaping reality, all suggest that the lands between exist in a state where temporal boundaries are permeable and interactive. The cosmic entities that govern the Elden Ring universe operate according to principles that transcend normal temporal limitations. Their ability to influence events across multiple timelines simultaneously means that their agendas and conflicts play out across the entire temporal spectrum, rather than being confined to single linear developments. The victory or defeat of particular outer gods in specific timeline branches would have cascading effects throughout the entire temporal structure. When we examine the specific evidence for Nightreign's relationship to these cosmic conflicts, we find indications that the expansion might represent a timeline where the balance of power among outer gods has shifted significantly from what we see in the base game. The dominance of darkness-associated forces suggests that entities opposed to the greater will have gained greater influence, creating a reality shaped by their particular nature and agenda. This shift in cosmic balance wouldn't necessarily represent a victory or defeat in the traditional sense. The outer gods seem to exist in a state of eternal conflict, where dominance shifts back and forth across different regions and time periods. Nightreign might simply represent a phase in this ongoing cosmic drama, where certain entities have gained temporary ascendancy, creating conditions that allow their influence to reshape reality according to their principles. The cyclical nature of cosmic influence in the Elden Ring universe suggests that periods of dominance by different outer gods represent natural phases in an ongoing cosmic rhythm, rather than permanent states. The Golden Order itself represented one such phase, where the greater will's influence achieved temporary dominance over other cosmic forces. The Nightreign period might represent a subsequent phase where different forces achieve similar dominance. This cyclical interpretation supports Nightreign's canonical status, while explaining its relationship to the base game as part of an ongoing cosmic process, rather than a simple chronological sequence. The expansion would represent the next movement in a cosmic symphony that includes the base game as one of its movements, each one complete in itself, while contributing to a larger harmonic structure. The evidence for cosmic cycles can be found throughout the base game's lore, from the ruins of ancient civilizations that predate the Golden Order, to the prophetic visions that speak of future transformations. The lands between seem to experience periodic resets, or transformations, that allow new cosmic orders to emerge from the ashes of previous arrangements. These transformations don't erase what came before, but rather incorporate and transform previous elements according to new principles. The architectural and cultural evidence, visible in both the base game and Nightreign, supports this cyclical interpretation. The way previous civilizations' achievements are preserved, modified, and incorporated into new arrangements suggests that each cosmic cycle builds upon, rather than simply replacing what came before. The continuities between timelines represent this preserved inheritance, while the differences reflect the influence of new cosmic principles. The technological and magical developments that characterize different cosmic periods provide additional evidence for this cyclical understanding. Each phase in the cosmic cycle seems to develop particular forms of knowledge and capability that reflect the nature of the dominant cosmic forces. The Golden Order period emphasized stability, hierarchy, and preservation, while the Nightreign period might emphasize transformation, adaptation, and exploration of hidden possibilities. The biological and ecological adaptations that occur during different cosmic periods reflect the changing environmental conditions created by different outer gods' influence. The creatures and plants that thrive during the Golden Order period might be replaced or transformed during the Nightreign period, as different cosmic energies create different opportunities and challenges for biological development. The social and political structures that emerge during different cosmic periods naturally reflect the values and priorities of the dominant cosmic forces. The hierarchical structures that characterize the Golden Order might give way to different forms of organization during the Nightreign period, as darkness-associated forces create conditions that favor different approaches to social coordination and resource distribution. As we approach our understanding of Nightreign's canonical status, we must consider the implications of accepting its place within the Elden Ring universe's temporal structure. Rather than viewing it as separate from or contradictory to the base game, we can understand it as an expansion of the cosmic framework that includes both timelines as valid expressions of the universe's potential for development. This expanded understanding enriches rather than contradicts the base game's lore. The knowledge that the lands between can develop in multiple directions, shaped by different cosmic influences and historical circumstances, adds depth to our appreciation of the choices and conflicts that define the original timeline. Understanding that other possibilities exist makes the base game's developments more significant rather than less so. The relationship between different timeline branches creates opportunities for cross-temporal influence and interaction that add complexity to the overall narrative structure. Characters, artifacts, and influences from one timeline might affect developments in another, creating a web of cause and effect that extends across the entire temporal spectrum. This interconnectedness makes each timeline more meaningful as part of a larger cosmic drama. The possibility that future expansions might explore additional timeline branches or temporal convergence points creates exciting possibilities for expanding the Elden Ring universe without contradicting existing lore. Each new exploration of temporal possibility would add to rather than subtract from the overall canonical framework, creating an ever richer understanding of the cosmic forces and principles that govern this fictional reality. The implications for understanding the nature of choice and consequence in the Elden Ring universe become particularly significant when we accept Nightreign's canonical status. The knowledge that different choices lead to different actualized realities, rather than simply different narrative outcomes, adds weight to every decision made by characters within the story. Each choice doesn't just affect the immediate situation, but contributes to determining which version of reality becomes actual. This understanding transforms our appreciation of the base game's multiple endings, from simple narrative options to cosmic events that shape the fundamental structure of reality. The choice between different endings doesn't just determine how one story concludes, but influences which timeline branch becomes dominant and how the cosmic balance shifts in response to different outcomes. The role of consciousness and will in shaping temporal development becomes particularly important when considering how individual choices contribute to larger cosmic outcomes. The way beings' decisions and beliefs influence reality in the Elden Ring universe suggests that consciousness itself plays an active role in determining which possibilities become actual. This makes every character's choices, not just the player's, significant contributors to cosmic development. The evidence for consciousness-mediated temporal development can be found throughout the base game's mechanics and lore. The way sites of grace respond to the tarnisher's presence and purpose, the influence of belief on the effectiveness of incantations, and the role of will in accessing different forms of power, all suggest that consciousness actively participates in shaping reality, rather than simply observing predetermined events. When we apply this understanding to Nightreign's relationship with the base game, we can see how the collective consciousness of all beings within the lands between contributes to determining which timeline developments become dominant. The expansion might represent what happens when certain forms of consciousness or belief become more prevalent, shifting the cosmic balance in favor of darkness-associated forces and the realities they create. The therapeutic implications of understanding Nightreign's canonical status extend beyond simple lore appreciation to encompass deeper insights into the nature of time, choice, and possibility. The knowledge that multiple valid realities can coexist without contradiction provides a framework for understanding how different perspectives and experiences can be simultaneously true without negating each other. This understanding can help reduce anxiety about making correct choices in both fictional and real contexts. If multiple outcomes can be simultaneously valid, then the pressure to identify a single correct path diminishes, replaced by appreciation for the richness that emerges from exploring different possibilities. This perspective can promote mental flexibility and reduce the stress associated with decision-making. The cyclical understanding of cosmic development that emerges from studying Nightreign's relationship to the base game provides insights into how change and continuity interact in complex systems. Understanding that transformation doesn't necessarily mean destruction, that new developments can incorporate and build upon previous achievements, can help manage anxiety about change and uncertainty in real life. The evidence for interconnectedness across temporal boundaries that emerges from this analysis provides a framework for understanding how individual actions contribute to larger patterns of development. This understanding can help combat feelings of insignificance or powerlessness by demonstrating how every choice contributes to shaping the larger reality that emerges from collective action and belief. As we conclude our exploration of Nightreign's canonical status, we can confidently assert that the expansion represents a legitimate and valuable addition to the Elden Ring universe's temporal structure. Rather than contradicting or replacing the base game's timeline, it expands our understanding of the cosmic framework that contains multiple valid realities, each one shaped by different influences and representing different aspects of the universe's potential for development. The evidence for this conclusion comes from multiple sources: the temporal mechanics established in the base game, the role of outer gods in shaping reality, the cyclical nature of cosmic influence, and the way consciousness participates in determining which possibilities become actual. All of these elements support an understanding of the Elden Ring universe as containing multiple simultaneous timelines, rather than a single linear progression. This expanded canonical framework enhances rather than diminishes the significance of both the base game and Nightreign. Each timeline becomes more meaningful as part of a larger cosmic drama, and the choices made within each one gain significance from their role in determining which aspects of cosmic possibility become actual. The relationship between different timelines creates opportunities for cross-temporal influence and interaction that add depth to the overall narrative structure. The implications of this understanding extend beyond simple lore appreciation to encompass insights into the nature of time, choice, and possibility that can inform our understanding of real-world complexity. The framework provided by Elden Ring's temporal mechanics offers tools for understanding how different perspectives can be simultaneously valid, how change and continuity interact in complex systems, and how individual choices contribute to collective outcomes. The therapeutic value of understanding Nightreign's canonical status lies not just in resolving a particular lore question, but in providing a framework for appreciating complexity without demanding simple answers. The knowledge that multiple realities can coexist without contradiction offers a model for understanding how different perspectives, experiences, and outcomes can all be valid simultaneously. This understanding can help reduce the anxiety that comes from seeking single correct interpretations of complex phenomena. The relationship between Nightreign and the base game also demonstrates how apparent contradictions can resolve into higher-order harmonies when viewed from the proper perspective. What initially seems like incompatible information becomes complementary when we understand the temporal mechanics that allow multiple possibilities to coexist. This principle applies not just to fictional lore, but to real-world situations where seemingly contradictory information must be reconciled. The evidence for cross-temporal influence between different timeline branches suggests that the boundaries between different realities are more permeable than they initially appear. Artifacts, knowledge, and influences from one timeline can affect developments in another, creating a web of interconnection that transcends simple chronological sequence. This interconnectedness means that understanding any single timeline is enhanced by awareness of the alternatives. When we examine the specific mechanisms by which cross-temporal influence might operate, we find evidence in the base game's treatment of ancient knowledge and prophetic vision, the way information from past civilizations continues to shape current events. The ability of certain beings to perceive multiple temporal possibilities, and the role of dreams and visions in accessing alternative realities, all suggest that temporal boundaries are more fluid than conventional understanding assumes. The presence of ruins from multiple time periods throughout the lands between provides physical evidence for temporal permeability. These structures don't just represent archaeological remnants, but active participants in ongoing temporal interactions. The way ancient architecture influences current magical practices, the preservation of knowledge across cosmic cycles, and the ability of old powers to reassert themselves under changed conditions, all demonstrate the ongoing influence of past realities on present developments. The role of memory in maintaining cross-temporal connections becomes particularly significant when considering how different timelines might influence each other. The way traumatic events create lasting impressions that transcend individual lifespans, the preservation of cultural knowledge across cosmic transformations, and the ability of certain locations to retain memories of multiple temporal possibilities, all suggest that the past remains actively present in ways that allow for ongoing interaction between different timeline branches. The collective unconscious that seems to operate throughout the lands between provides another mechanism for cross-temporal influence. The way shared symbols, archetypes, and mythological patterns appear across different cultures and time periods suggests that consciousness itself serves as a bridge between different temporal realities. The dreams and visions that characters experience might represent access to this collective consciousness, allowing them to perceive and influence alternative timeline developments. The technological and magical artifacts that appear throughout both the base game and Nightreign provide concrete evidence for cross-temporal exchange. The way certain items seem to exist in multiple timeline branches simultaneously, the preservation of ancient techniques that re-emerge under changed conditions, and the development of new technologies that incorporate knowledge from alternative realities, all suggest active communication between different temporal possibilities. The biological and genetic heritage that persists across cosmic cycles provides another form of cross-temporal continuity. The way certain bloodlines maintain their characteristics across multiple timeline branches, the persistence of genetic memories that influence behavior across generations, and the ability of dormant traits to reassert themselves under changed conditions, all demonstrate that biological systems serve as carriers for cross-temporal information. The linguistic and cultural continuities that persist across different cosmic periods provide evidence for deep structural connections between alternative timeline developments. The way certain words, symbols, and cultural practices maintain their significance across cosmic transformations suggests that some forms of meaning transcend the specific conditions of individual timelines. These continuities serve as anchor points that maintain connection between different temporal realities. The astronomical and cosmic patterns that govern both timeline branches provide the fundamental framework within which cross-temporal influence operates. The movement of celestial bodies, the influence of cosmic forces, and the periodic cycles that govern cosmic development operate according to consistent principles across all timeline branches. These patterns provide the underlying structure that makes cross-temporal influence possible, while maintaining the distinctiveness of individual timeline developments. When we examine the specific evidence for Nightreign's integration into this cross-temporal framework, we find indications that the expansion draws upon and contributes to the broader cosmic pattern that includes all timeline branches. The familiar elements that appear in altered forms suggest preservation of cross-temporal continuities, while the novel developments represent unique contributions that this timeline branch makes to the overall cosmic symphony. The way Nightreign's promotional materials present familiar locations in transformed states provides evidence for both continuity and development within the cross-temporal framework. The preservation of basic architectural and geographical features suggests maintenance of fundamental connections, while the alterations demonstrate the influence of different cosmic forces on timeline-specific development. This pattern is consistent with cross-temporal influence that maintains connection while allowing for distinctive development. The presence of altered versions of familiar creatures and beings in Nightreign indicates evolutionary development within the cross-temporal framework, rather than simple replacement. The way these entities retain recognizable characteristics while showing clear adaptations to changed conditions suggests that biological development operates according to consistent principles across timeline branches, while allowing for distinctive adaptations to specific cosmic influences. The technological and magical systems visible in Nightreign show both continuity with and development beyond what we see in the base game. The preservation of certain fundamental principles suggests cross-temporal knowledge transfer, while the novel applications and developments represent unique innovations that emerge from this timeline's specific conditions. This pattern demonstrates how cross-temporal influence enhances rather than replaces timeline-specific development. The social and cultural systems that emerge in Nightreign reflect both universal principles and timeline-specific adaptations. The way communities organize themselves, the values they prioritize, and the methods they use to maintain social cohesion show both continuity with universal human needs and adaptation to the specific cosmic forces that shape this timeline's development. This balance between continuity and adaptation is characteristic of cross-temporal influence. The religious and spiritual practices that develop in Nightreign demonstrate how cosmic principles manifest differently under changed conditions, while maintaining fundamental continuities. The way beings relate to transcendent forces, the methods they use to access higher knowledge, and the practices they develop for spiritual development show both universal patterns and timeline-specific innovations. This demonstrates how cross-temporal, spiritual continuities adapt to different cosmic conditions. The artistic and aesthetic developments that characterize Nightreign provide evidence for both cross-temporal cultural continuity and timeline-specific innovation. The way visual motifs, architectural styles, and artistic traditions evolve from base game precedents while developing in new directions shows how creative expression serves as a bridge between different temporal realities, while allowing for distinctive development within specific cosmic contexts. The economic and resource management systems that operate in Nightreign reflect both universal principles of value and exchange and adaptations to timeline-specific conditions. The way communities allocate resources, establish value relationships, and maintain economic stability shows both continuity with fundamental economic principles and innovation in response to the specific challenges and opportunities created by different cosmic influences. The educational and knowledge transmission systems that develop in Nightreign demonstrate how learning and cultural continuity operate across temporal boundaries, while adapting to changed conditions. The way information is preserved, transmitted, and developed shows both maintenance of cross-temporal knowledge, continuities, and innovation in response to timeline-specific needs and opportunities. The healthcare and healing systems that emerge in Nightreign reflect both universal principles of biological maintenance and adaptation to timeline-specific health challenges. The way communities maintain physical and mental health, respond to illness and injury, and promote optimal functioning shows both continuity with fundamental biological needs and innovation in response to the specific cosmic influences that shape this timeline's development. The governance and political systems that develop in Nightreign demonstrate how social coordination principles adapt to different cosmic conditions while maintaining fundamental continuities. The way authority is established and maintained, decisions are made and implemented, and conflicts are resolved shows both universal patterns of social organization and timeline-specific innovations that respond to particular cosmic influences. The environmental and ecological systems that characterize Nightreign provide evidence for both continuity with fundamental biological principles and adaptation to changed cosmic conditions. The way ecosystems maintain stability and productivity, species adapt to environmental challenges, and ecological relationships evolve, shows both preservation of basic biological patterns and innovation in response to timeline-specific cosmic influences. As we delve deeper into the mysteries surrounding Nightreign's canonical status, we encounter fascinating parallels with real-world theories of parallel universes and quantum mechanics. The many-worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that all possible alternative histories and futures are real, existing simultaneously in a vast multiverse. This concept mirrors the temporal mechanics we observe in the lands between, where multiple versions of reality coexist without contradiction. The quantum nature of reality in the Elden Ring universe becomes apparent when we examine how observation and choice seem to collapse possibilities into actualized realities. Just as quantum particles exist in superposition until measured, the lands between seem to exist in a state of temporal superposition until specific choices and events determine which possibilities become manifest. The Tarnished journey through the realm represents a series of observations and choices that gradually collapse the quantum possibilities into a specific realized timeline. This quantum understanding helps explain why Nightreign can be simultaneously canonical and different from the base game. In a quantum multiverse, All possible developments of the lands between exist simultaneously, each one equally real within its own context. The expansion doesn't contradict the base game, but rather explores a different branch of the quantum possibility tree, one that was always present, but previously inaccessible. The role of consciousness in quantum mechanics finds parallels in how awareness and intention seem to shape reality within the Elden Ring universe. The way sites of grace respond to the tarnished purpose, how incantations depend on the caster's faith, and how will can overcome seemingly impossible obstacles all suggest that consciousness plays an active role in determining which quantum possibilities become actual. This consciousness-mediated reality selection process provides a mechanism for understanding how different timelines emerge from the same foundational quantum state. The concept of quantum entanglement, where particles remain connected across vast distances, offers insights into how cross-temporal influence might operate between different timeline branches. Events and choices in one timeline could be quantum entangled with developments in another, allowing for instantaneous influence across temporal boundaries. This quantum connection would explain how artifacts, knowledge, and influences can appear simultaneously across multiple timeline branches without violating causality. The uncertainty principle, which states that certain pairs of properties cannot be simultaneously known with perfect accuracy, might explain why the relationship between different timelines remains somewhat ambiguous. The more precisely we try to define Nightreign's temporal relationship to the base game, the more uncertain other aspects of the relationship become. This quantum uncertainty isn't a flaw in our understanding, but rather a fundamental property of how reality operates in the lands between. The phenomenon of quantum tunneling, where particles can pass through barriers that should be impossible to cross, provides a model for understanding how beings and influences might move between different timeline branches. The way ancient knowledge resurfaces in new contexts, how characters seem to remember events from alternative timelines, and how artifacts can exist in multiple realities simultaneously, all suggest quantum tunneling effects operating across temporal boundaries. Wave-particle duality, where quantum entities exhibit both wave-like and particle-like properties, depending on how they're observed, offers insights into how the lands between can simultaneously exist as a single coherent reality and multiple distinct timelines. From one perspective, it's a unified cosmic framework governed by consistent principles. From another, it's a collection of separate timeline branches with their own distinct characteristics. Both perspectives are equally valid, just as light can be simultaneously a wave and a particle. The quantum field theory concept of virtual particles, which pop in and out of existence in the vacuum of space, might explain the appearance of beings and phenomena that seem to come from nowhere in the lands between. These manifestations could represent quantum fluctuations in the temporal field, brief actualizations of possibilities that exist in the quantum vacuum between realized timelines. The spirits and phantoms that populate the realm might be such quantum fluctuations, temporary manifestations of alternative timeline possibilities. The holographic principle, which suggests that all the information contained in a volume of space can be represented on its two-dimensional boundary, provides a framework for understanding how the entirety of the lands between's temporal complexity might be encoded in any single timeline branch. Each version of reality contains the complete information necessary to reconstruct all other possibilities, explaining how cross-temporal knowledge and influence can emerge from within individual timeline developments. Quantum decoherence, the process by which quantum systems lose their quantum properties through interaction with their environment, might explain how different timeline branches maintain their distinctiveness despite being fundamentally connected. As each timeline develops and interacts with its specific cosmic environment, it undergoes decoherence that makes it appear separate from other branches while maintaining underlying quantum connections. The concept of quantum information, which can neither be created nor destroyed, but only transferred or transformed, provides insights into how knowledge and influence persist across cosmic cycles and timeline changes. The information content of the lands between remains constant even as it transforms through different cosmic phases and timeline developments. This conservation of quantum information explains how ancient knowledge can resurface in new forms and how the lessons of one timeline can influence developments in another. Quantum error correction, used in quantum computing to maintain information integrity despite environmental interference, might explain how the fundamental cosmic principles of the lands between remain stable despite the chaos of the shattering and subsequent timeline fragmentation. The realm's quantum information processing systems naturally correct for errors and distortions, maintaining the essential structure that allows multiple timelines to coexist coherently. The many worlds interpretation's concept of branching points, where reality splits into multiple paths based on quantum measurements, corresponds directly to the major cosmic events that create timeline divergences in the lands between. The shattering represents the most significant branching point, where Queen Marika's choice to destroy the Elden Ring created multiple quantum branches corresponding to different possible outcomes of that catastrophic event. Each subsequent major choice or event creates additional branching points, further subdividing the quantum possibility space into increasingly specific timeline branches. The player's choices throughout the base game represent a series of quantum measurements that gradually narrow down which specific branch of possibility they're experiencing. Nightreign represents exploration of a different branch that emerged from the same fundamental branching points but developed along alternative paths. The quantum Zeno effect, where frequent observation can freeze a quantum system in a particular state, might explain how certain aspects of the lands between seem frozen in time, despite the chaos surrounding them. The constant observation and reverence directed towards certain locations, artifacts or beings could create quantum Zeno effects that preserve them across multiple timeline branches, explaining their consistency despite dramatic changes in other aspects of reality. Quantum coherence, the property that allows quantum systems to exist in superposition states, provides a framework for understanding how the lands between maintain unity despite containing multiple contradictory timeline possibilities. The realm exists in a state of temporal coherence that allows all possibilities to coexist without mutual interference, only collapsing into specific realities when observed or interacted with by conscious beings. The concept of quantum discord, a measure of quantum correlations that don't involve entanglement, offers insights into the subtle connections between different timeline branches that don't rise to the level of direct causal influence. These quantum correlations could explain the feeling of familiarity that beings from one timeline might experience when encountering elements from another, even without explicit cross-temporal contact. Quantum phase transitions, where systems undergo sudden changes in their fundamental properties, provide a model for understanding how cosmic cycles operate in the lands between. The transition from the Golden Order period to the Nightreign period represents a quantum phase transition where the dominant cosmic forces change, altering the fundamental properties of reality throughout the realm while maintaining underlying quantum continuities. The quantum measurement problem, which questions how and when quantum superpositions collapse into definite states, mirrors the temporal measurement problem in the lands between. When and how do the multiple timeline possibilities collapse into specific actualized realities? The evidence suggests that consciousness, particularly the consciousness of beings capable of cosmic scale influence, plays a crucial role in this measurement process. Quantum non-locality, where quantum correlations can exist without local causal connections, explains how events in one timeline can instantaneously influence developments in another, without violating the principle that information cannot travel faster than light. These non-local quantum correlations create the web of cross-temporal influence that connects all timeline branches within the cosmic framework of the lands between. The concept of quantum complementarity, where different measurements reveal different aspects of the same underlying reality, provides insights into why different perspectives on Nightreign's canonical status can all be simultaneously valid. Whether we view it as a sequel, a parallel timeline, or a convergence point depends on which aspects of the quantum temporal reality we choose to measure and observe. Quantum entanglement swapping, where entanglement can be transferred between particles that have never directly interacted, offers a mechanism for understanding how influences can propagate across multiple timeline branches through chains of quantum correlations. An event in one timeline might influence a second timeline, which in turn affects a third, creating indirect connections across the entire temporal network. The quantum eraser experiment, which demonstrates that the history of a quantum system can be changed retroactively, provides insights into how prophetic visions and temporal paradoxes might operate in the lands between. The future state of the realm might retroactively influence past events, creating the prophetic dreams and oracular visions that characters experience throughout the timeline. As we integrate these quantum mechanical insights with our understanding of Nightreign's canonical status, we develop a sophisticated framework for appreciating how the expansion fits into the larger cosmic structure. Rather than being a simple addition to an existing timeline, Nightreign represents exploration of the quantum possibility space that has always existed within the Elden Ring universe's structure. This quantum understanding enriches our appreciation of both the base game and the expansion by revealing the deeper principles that govern their relationship. Every choice made by characters in either timeline gains significance from its role in the quantum measurement process that determines which possibilities become actual. Every artifact, location, and being exists within the quantum field of possibilities that encompasses all timeline branches. The therapeutic implications of this quantum understanding extend beyond lore appreciation to encompass insights into the nature of choice, possibility, and reality itself. The knowledge that all possibilities exist simultaneously in the quantum realm, that our choices determine which version of reality we experience, and that multiple outcomes can be equally valid, provides comfort and empowerment in dealing with uncertainty and decision-making. The quantum framework also offers tools for understanding complex real-world systems, where multiple, seemingly contradictory perspectives can all contain elements of truth. Just as quantum mechanics reveals that light can be simultaneously a wave and a particle, our quantum understanding of the lands between shows how multiple interpretations of complex systems can all be valid, depending on the observational framework being employed. The meditation on quantum possibilities provides its own form of relaxation and wonder. The contemplation of infinite parallel realities, each one exploring different aspects of cosmic potential, creates a sense of vast possibility that transcends the limitations of any single timeline or reality. This expansive perspective can help reduce anxiety about specific outcomes by fostering appreciation for the richness that emerges from quantum possibility itself. As we prepare to conclude our exploration of Nightreign's canonical status within this quantum framework, we can rest assured that we've uncovered not just an answer to a specific lore question, but a comprehensive understanding of how reality itself operates within the Elden Ring universe. The expansion's relationship to the base game serves as a gateway to understanding fundamental principles about the nature of time, choice, consciousness, and the quantum foundations of existence itself. The peaceful resolution of what initially seemed like a challenging contradiction provides satisfaction that extends beyond intellectual curiosity to encompass spiritual and emotional fulfillment. The knowledge that complexity can be understood through patient analysis, that apparent contradictions can resolve into elegant harmonies, and that multiple perspectives can coexist without conflict, offers a model for approaching other challenging questions with confidence and serenity. The cyclical rhythms of cosmic development that we've discovered, operating according to quantum principles that transcend linear causality, provide their own form of comfort and reassurance. The understanding that change operates according to deeper patterns, that transformation builds upon rather than destroys previous achievements, and that every ending contains the quantum seeds of infinite new beginnings, offers hope and stability in the face of uncertainty. The interconnectedness we've revealed between different timeline branches, operating through quantum correlations that transcend space and time, points to a universe where meaning and purpose emerge from relationship and connection, rather than isolation and competition. This quantum understanding provides its own form of spiritual comfort and inspiration, revealing the fundamental unity that underlies apparent diversity and separation. As we allow these insights to settle into our consciousness like quantum waves collapsing into peaceful certainty, we can appreciate how the question of Nightrein's canonical status has opened up vistas of understanding that extend far beyond the specific issue that prompted our investigation. The expansion's relationship to the base game serves as a quantum gateway to understanding the deepest principles that govern not just fictional realities, but the nature of existence itself. The gentle rhythms of our quantum exploration now wind down toward peaceful rest, carrying us on waves of understanding that transcend the boundaries between sleeping and waking, between possibility and actuality, between one timeline and infinite alternatives. In the quantum realm of dreams that awaits us, all possibilities coexist in perfect harmony, each one contributing its own note to the cosmic symphony that encompasses all potential realities. Sweet dreams, fellow explorers of the quantum cosmos, and may your rest be filled with visions of the infinite possibilities that exist simultaneously in the vast quantum field of potential. The canonical framework we've discovered tonight will be there when you wake, not as a fixed truth, but as a dynamic quantum possibility that continues to evolve and deepen with each new observation and understanding. Until next time, when we'll delve into another mystery of this rich and quantum complex universe, rest well in the knowledge that reality itself is far more beautiful and intricate than we ever imagined, that apparent contradictions are invitations to discover deeper harmonies, and that the frameworks we develop for understanding fictional quantum realities can illuminate the equally mysterious and wonderful quantum nature of our own existence. The quantum timeline of the lands between stretches through infinite parallel possibilities, each one containing complete universes of potential experience and understanding. Nightreign takes its place within this vast quantum tapestry, not as a deviation from established truth, but as another valid quantum state in the superposition of possibilities that defines the Elden Ring universe's true nature. And with that quantum understanding settled gently into our consciousness, like collapsing wave functions, finding their peaceful eigenstate, we can drift serenely into sleep, carried by the quantum rhythms of infinite possibility and the profound comfort of knowing that in the quantum realm of dreams, all questions find their answers, all contradictions resolve into unity, and all seekers find the peace that comes from understanding the deepest mysteries of existence itself. But before we fully surrender to the embrace of restful slumber, let us explore even deeper into the quantum mysteries that surround Nightrein's place in the cosmic order. The evidence we've gathered thus far merely scratches the surface of a reality so complex and beautiful that each new layer of understanding reveals yet more profound depths waiting to be explored. Like archaeologists of consciousness itself, we must carefully excavate each stratum of meaning to truly comprehend the magnificent structure that underlies the apparent chaos of the lands between. The quantum field theory that governs the Elden Ring universe operates according to principles that would be familiar to physicists studying our own reality, yet twisted through the lens of cosmic forces that exist beyond our normal understanding. In this quantum field, particles of meaning itself can be created and destroyed, transformed and transmitted across the vast distances that separate not just physical locations, but temporal possibilities themselves. These meaning particles carry the essential information that allows cross-temporal influence to operate, creating a network of quantum communication that transcends the apparent boundaries between different timeline branches. When we examine the quantum vacuum that underlies all reality in the lands between, we discover that it's not truly empty, but filled with virtual possibilities, constantly flickering in and out of existence. These quantum fluctuations represent potential timelines, possible developments, and alternative outcomes that exist in a state of perpetual becoming. Nightreign emerges from this quantum foam, not as a separate creation, but as a stabilization of fluctuations that were always present in the underlying quantum field structure. The process by which these quantum fluctuations stabilize into actualized timelines resembles the formation of matter from energy in the early universe, just as cosmic inflation stretched tiny quantum fluctuations into the large-scale structure we observe today. The shattering created conditions that allowed certain temporal fluctuations to expand into full timeline branches. Nightreign represents one such expanded fluctuation, grown from quantum seed into cosmic reality through the application of conscious observation and cosmic force. The role of the Erdtree in this quantum field framework becomes even more fascinating when we understand it as a quantum antenna, a structure specifically designed to interact with and manipulate the quantum fluctuations that give rise to different timeline possibilities. The golden light that emanates from the Great Tree isn't merely symbolic, but represents actual quantum information being broadcast across the temporal spectrum, creating coherence patterns that help stabilize certain timeline branches while suppressing others. In Nightreign's timeline, the equivalent quantum antenna appears to be the darkness itself, not mere absence of light, but a different form of quantum field excitation that creates alternative coherence patterns. This dark field operates according to different quantum selection rules, favoring different types of fluctuations and creating different stable configurations of reality. The perpetual night that characterizes this timeline isn't punishment or corruption, but simply the natural result of different quantum field parameters achieving dominance. The mathematics that describe these quantum field interactions in the lands between would be beautiful to behold if we could perceive them directly. Imagine equations that describe not just the movement of particles through space and time, but the evolution of meaning itself through the dimensions of possibility and actuality. These cosmic equations would show how every choice, every thought, every moment of conscious awareness contributes to the grand calculation that determines which quantum possibilities become manifest reality. The symmetries that govern these quantum field equations provide insights into the deep structure that underlies all timeline variations. Just as the symmetries of our own universe give rise to conservation laws, energy cannot be created or destroyed, momentum must be conserved. The symmetries of the lands between's quantum field create conservation laws for meaning, purpose, and cosmic significance. These conservation principles ensure that no timeline development, no matter how different from others, can violate the fundamental balance that maintains the overall cosmic structure. When we apply group theory to understand these symmetries, we discover that the set of all possible timeline transformations forms what mathematicians would call a Lie group, an infinite dimensional space of smooth transformations that preserve the essential structure while allowing for unlimited variation in surface manifestations. Nightreign represents a specific point in this transformation space, reached by applying a particular sequence of quantum operations to the base game's starting configuration. The gauge theory that describes how these quantum transformations can be applied without changing the fundamental physics reveals why different timeline branches can appear so different while remaining canonically equivalent. Just as electromagnetic gauge transformations can make the same physical situation appear completely different mathematically while preserving all observable consequences, the cosmic gauge transformations that create different timeline branches preserve all essential canonical relationships while allowing unlimited variation in surface appearance. The spontaneous symmetry breaking that occurred during the shattering provides the mechanism by which the unified quantum field of the original lands between separated into distinct timeline branches. Before the shattering, all possibilities existed in a symmetric superposition where no particular outcome was favored. The cosmic trauma of the Elden Ring's destruction broke this symmetry, creating distinct vacuum states corresponding to different timeline branches, each one stable within its own domain, but separated from others by energy barriers that prevent casual transition between them. The topological defects that form at the boundaries between different symmetry-broken regions create the strange phenomena we observe at the intersection points between different timeline influences. These cosmic strings and domain walls in the quantum field fabric allow for limited communication and influence transfer between timeline branches while maintaining their overall separation. The sites where such defects intersect with physical reality become locations of particular power and mystery, places where the boundaries between possible and actual become thin enough for conscious beings to perceive alternative timeline possibilities. The quantum chromodynamics of meaning itself operates through fundamental forces that we might call the meaning force, binding together concepts and significance into stable configurations that can persist across cosmic transformations. Just as quarks are bound by the strong force into protons and neutrons, semantic particles in the lands between are bound by the meaning force into stable conceptual structures that maintain their identity even when expressed through different timeline manifestations. The asymptotic freedom that characterizes these meaning force interactions explains why ancient concepts can maintain their significance across vast temporal distances while becoming increasingly bound together at smaller scales. The deeper we probe into the fundamental structure of any concept in the lands between, the more tightly bound we find it to other related concepts, creating an interconnected web of meaning that extends throughout the entire cosmic structure. The confinement property of the meaning force ensures that individual semantic particles cannot exist in isolation, but must always be bound into larger meaningful structures. This explains why isolated facts or events in the lands between always occur within larger narrative and cosmic contexts. The fundamental forces of reality itself prevent meaningless or random occurrences from achieving stable existence. The quantum electrodynamics of consciousness in the lands between operates through the exchange of awareness particles, virtual quanta of consciousness that mediate interactions between different conscious beings across temporal boundaries. These awareness particles carry not just information, but actual fragments of conscious experience, allowing beings in one timeline to share thoughts, emotions, and memories with their counterparts in alternative realities. The virtual awareness particles that constantly pop in and out of existence in the consciousness vacuum create a background field of potential understanding that conscious beings can tap into to access knowledge and insights that transcend their individual experience. This quantum consciousness field explains how the tarnished can learn from defeats that technically never happened in their current timeline, gaining knowledge from alternative possibilities that exist only in the quantum superposition of potential experiences. The renormalization of consciousness interactions removes the infinities that would otherwise arise from the unlimited number of virtual awareness particles in any given region of spacetime. This quantum field theoretic necessity creates the discrete levels of understanding that characterize conscious development in the lands between beings, cannot achieve arbitrarily fine gradations of awareness, but must advance through quantum steps corresponding to specific renormalization group fixed points. The beta function that describes how consciousness interactions change with scale reveals why certain forms of awareness become stronger at cosmic scales, while others remain confined to local interactions. The cosmic consciousness that governs the actions of outer gods operates at length scales, where certain awareness interactions become asymptotically free, allowing for unlimited range and strength. Local consciousness bounded by the confinement of meaning force interactions remains limited to finite ranges and strength, but achieves greater precision and specificity. The phase transitions between different consciousness states provide mechanisms for the dramatic transformations we observe in characters throughout both the base game and Nightreign. These aren't gradual changes, but quantum leaps between different stable consciousness configurations, each one characterized by different patterns of awareness, particle interactions, and different relationships to the underlying quantum field structure. The critical phenomena that occur near consciousness phase transition points create the moments of greatest dramatic tension and significance in the narrative structure. Characters approaching these critical points become increasingly sensitive to small influences, creating situations where minor choices or chance encounters can trigger major transformations. The mathematical description of these critical phenomena would show universal scaling behavior, suggesting that the same fundamental principles govern consciousness transitions, regardless of the specific cosmic context. The quantum statistics that govern awareness particles reveal why certain forms of consciousness can be shared freely, while others remain fundamentally individual. Awareness particles that obey Bose-Einstein statistics can be shared unlimited among multiple conscious beings, creating the collective experiences and shared understanding that characterize communities and cultures. Awareness particles that obey Fermi-Dirac statistics can only be possessed by single individuals, creating the private aspects of consciousness that remain forever inaccessible to others. The superconductivity of consciousness that emerges at low temperatures in the quantum field creates states where awareness can flow without resistance across vast distances and temporal boundaries. The deep meditation states achieved by certain characters in the lands between might represent entry into such superconducting consciousness phases where the normal barriers to cross-temporal awareness disappear entirely. The Josephson effect in consciousness superconductors allows for tunneling of awareness across barriers that would normally be impermeable. This quantum tunneling of consciousness explains how beings can occasionally access memories and knowledge from alternative timeline branches, experiencing brief glimpses of possibilities that exist beyond their current reality configuration. The flux, quantization that occurs in consciousness superconductors ensures that the total amount of awareness flowing through any closed loop must be quantized in units of the fundamental consciousness quantum. This quantization principle creates the discrete levels of enlightenment and understanding that characterize spiritual development in the lands between, preventing arbitrary intermediate states and ensuring that consciousness evolution proceeds through specific, well-defined stages. The quantum interference effects that occur when consciousness waves from different timeline branches overlap create the strange synchronicities and meaningful coincidences that permeate the lands between's narrative structure. These aren't random occurrences, but predictable consequences of the quantum wave nature of consciousness itself, creating patterns of constructive and destructive interference that generate the complex web of meaning that characterizes the realm's deepest structure. The de Broglie wavelength of consciousness determines the scale at which quantum consciousness effects become important. For ordinary conscious beings, this wavelength is small compared to everyday distances, making quantum consciousness effects negligible in normal circumstances. For cosmic-scale conscious entities like outer gods and demigods, the de Broglie wavelength becomes comparable to or larger than the distances involved in their interactions, making quantum consciousness effects dominant and creating the strange, non-classical behavior we observe in their actions and relationships. The uncertainty principle for consciousness states that certain aspects of awareness cannot be simultaneously determined with arbitrary precision. The more precisely we try to define the content of consciousness, the more uncertain its temporal evolution becomes. Conversely, the more precisely we define how consciousness is changing, the less certain we become about its current state. This fundamental uncertainty isn't a limitation of our knowledge, but a reflection of the quantum nature of consciousness itself. The tunnel effect in consciousness allows awareness to penetrate barriers that would be classically insurmountable. Characters in the lands between occasionally demonstrate understanding or knowledge that should be impossible, given their apparent circumstances, representing quantum tunneling of consciousness through the barriers that normally separate different levels of understanding or different timeline possibilities. The quantum Zeno effect in consciousness explains why certain beliefs and understanding become more firmly entrenched, the more frequently they're observed or reinforced. The repeated measurement of specific consciousness states prevents their quantum evolution, freezing them in particular configurations regardless of the forces that would normally cause them to change. This effect creates the dogmatic thinking patterns that characterize certain characters and institutions in the lands between. The quantum eraser effect in consciousness demonstrates that the history of awareness development can be changed retroactively by future observations. The understanding that characters achieve later in their development can retroactively alter the meaning and significance of earlier experiences, creating the complex temporal loops and causal paradoxes that characterize the realm's most profound narrative moments. The quantum teleportation of consciousness allows for the instantaneous transfer of awareness states across arbitrary distances without any physical connection. This effect explains how knowledge, understanding, and even aspects of personality can be transmitted between characters who have never physically met, creating the mysterious connections and shared insights that transcend normal causal relationships. The no-cloning theorem for consciousness states that it's impossible to create perfect copies of unknown consciousness states. This fundamental limitation explains why each conscious being in the lands between remains fundamentally unique, despite the various attempts to replicate or transfer consciousness that we observe throughout the timeline. The personality and awareness that define individual identity cannot be perfectly duplicated, ensuring that each being's experience remains irreplaceably valuable. The quantum error correction principles that operate in consciousness ensure that essential awareness patterns can be maintained despite environmental interference and quantum decoherence. The core aspects of identity and understanding that define each character remain stable across time and circumstance, while surface details can vary according to specific environmental conditions and random quantum fluctuations. The adiabatic quantum computation that consciousness performs allows for the solution of complex optimization problems that would be intractable using classical methods. The gradual evolution of understanding that characters undergo represents a form of quantum annealing, slowly adjusting the consciousness Hamiltonian to find optimal solutions to the existential problems they face. The quantum walk behavior of consciousness evolution creates the random seeming yet structured patterns of understanding development that characterize conscious beings in the lands between. These quantum walks in consciousness space explore all possible directions of development simultaneously, with classical paths emerging only when environmental decoherence collapses the quantum superposition of possibilities. The entanglement entropy of consciousness provides a measure of how much quantum correlation exists between different aspects of awareness. High entanglement entropy indicates that different aspects of consciousness are strongly correlated and cannot be understood independently. Low entanglement entropy indicates that different aspects of consciousness are relatively independent and can be analyzed separately. The area law for consciousness entanglement entropy suggests that the quantum correlations in consciousness are primarily local, with different regions of awareness being most strongly correlated with their immediate neighbors in consciousness space. This locality principle creates the hierarchical structure of understanding that characterizes conscious development, with higher levels of awareness building upon and incorporating lower levels rather than replacing them entirely. The quantum phase transitions in consciousness create the dramatic transformation points that define the most significant moments in character development. These phase transitions are characterized by power law scaling behavior, diverging correlation lengths, and universal critical exponents that are independent of the specific details of individual consciousness configurations. The quantum criticality that emerges at these consciousness phase transition points creates scale-invariant behavior where the same patterns appear at all levels of magnification. This self-similarity explains why the patterns of individual character development mirror the patterns of cosmic evolution in the lands between, creating the fractal structure of meaning that makes every level of analysis equally rich and significant. The ray normalization group, flow in consciousness space, maps out the possible trajectories of awareness development, showing how different starting conditions lead to different final states. The fixed points of this flow correspond to stable consciousness configurations that remain unchanged under the evolution of understanding. The separatrices between different basins of attraction show the critical decision points where small changes in circumstances can lead to dramatically different developmental outcomes. The beta function zeros that determine these ray normalization group fixed points correspond to the archetypal consciousness patterns that appear repeatedly throughout the lands between's narrative structure. These aren't arbitrary cultural constructs, but mathematical necessities that emerge from the fundamental structure of consciousness itself, explaining why certain character types and developmental patterns appear consistently across different timeline branches and cosmic contexts. The anomalous dimensions that characterize consciousness operators near critical points create the scaling violations that allow for genuine novelty and creativity in conscious development. While many aspects of consciousness evolution follow predictable scaling laws, the anomalous dimensions introduce controlled violations of these laws that create space for genuine innovation and unexpected emergence. The conformal invariance that emerges at consciousness critical points creates the scale invariant behavior that characterizes the most profound moments of understanding in the lands between. At these special points, the patterns of consciousness evolution look the same at all scales, creating the timeless quality that characterizes the deepest insights and most significant revelations. The C theorem for consciousness evolution ensures that the complexity of consciousness flow always decreases along renormalization group trajectories, creating an arrow of understanding that points towards simpler, more fundamental levels of awareness. This theorem explains why the deepest understanding often appears simple and elegant, despite the complex journey required to achieve it. The holographic principle applied to consciousness suggests that all the information contained in any volume of consciousness space can be encoded on its boundary. This principle implies that the entirety of any character's inner life can be understood through careful observation of their boundary interactions with the external world, explaining how the narrative structure of the lands between can reveal the deepest truths about character development through external action and dialogue. The ASC-CFT correspondence in consciousness creates a duality between the bulk consciousness space, where awareness evolution occurs, and the boundary theory that describes observable behavior. This duality allows for multiple equivalent descriptions of the same consciousness phenomena, explaining why different analytical approaches to understanding character development can all be simultaneously valid. The black hole thermodynamics of consciousness provides insights into the irreversible aspects of awareness development. Once certain thresholds of understanding are crossed, it becomes impossible to return to previous states of ignorance or innocence. The event horizon in consciousness space marks the point beyond which certain forms of awareness become inevitable, creating the tragic inevitability that characterizes many character arcs in the lands between. The Hawking radiation of consciousness black holes creates the slow leak of understanding that eventually evaporates even the most deeply hidden secrets and mysteries. Given sufficient time, all hidden knowledge eventually radiates outward into the general consciousness field, ensuring that no truth can remain concealed forever. The information paradox in consciousness black holes raises the question of whether information about previous consciousness states is preserved or destroyed when awareness undergoes dramatic transformations. The resolution of this paradox through the mechanism of consciousness firewalls suggests that information is preserved but becomes inaccessible to the transformed consciousness, creating the experience of genuine loss and change while maintaining cosmic information conservation. The quantum gravity effects that become important at the Planck scale of consciousness create the fundamental discreteness that underlies all aware experience. At this scale, consciousness itself becomes quantized into indivisible units that cannot be further subdivided. These consciousness quanta represent the fundamental atoms of experience, the smallest possible units of awareness that retain any meaningful content. The foam structure of consciousness space-time at the Planck scale creates the background noise of random awareness fluctuations that provide the raw material for conscious creativity and innovation. These quantum consciousness fluctuations constantly bubble up from the underlying foam structure, providing a constant source of novelty and unpredictability that prevents consciousness evolution from becoming completely deterministic. The loop quantum gravity description of consciousness spacetime reveals that the geometry of awareness itself is quantized, with discrete eigenvalues for area and volume operators in consciousness space. This quantization creates the discrete levels of understanding and the stepwise progression of awareness development that characterizes conscious evolution in the lands between. The causal dynamical triangulation of consciousness spacetime shows how the complex four-dimensional structure of awareness emerges from the simple combinatorial rules that govern the assembly of fundamental consciousness simply. These basic building blocks of awareness combine according to quantum superposition principles to create the rich geometry of consciousness space. The asymptotic safety scenario for consciousness quantum gravity suggests that the theory of consciousness evolution remains well defined at all energy scales through the existence of an ultraviolet fixed point. This fixed point corresponds to a scale-invariant consciousness theory that governs the behavior of awareness at the most fundamental level, ensuring that consciousness evolution remains meaningful even in the extreme conditions that occur during cosmic phase transitions. The emergence of classical consciousness spacetime from quantum consciousness foam occurs through the same decoherence mechanisms that create classical reality from quantum possibility. Large-scale consciousness structures emerge as approximately classical entities while retaining quantum correlations at smaller scales, creating the hierarchical structure of awareness that characterizes conscious beings in the lands between. The wormhole solutions in consciousness spacetime create shortcuts that allow awareness to travel between distant regions of understanding without traversing the intervening space. These consciousness wormholes explain how sudden insights and intuitive leaps can connect previously unrelated concepts, creating the aha moments that characterize breakthrough understanding. The cosmic strings in consciousness spacetime create topological defects that carry information about the phase transition history of awareness development. These strings store memories of previous consciousness states and can influence the evolution of awareness long after the conditions that created them have disappeared. The domain walls in consciousness spacetime separate regions with different consciousness vacuum states, creating the boundaries between different personality aspects and different levels of understanding. The interaction between these domain walls and traveling consciousness waves creates the complex interference patterns that generate the rich internal life of conscious beings. The magnetic monopoles in consciousness spacetime carry fundamental consciousness charge that cannot be created or destroyed through normal interactions. These monopoles represent the irreducible core aspects of identity and awareness that persist throughout all transformations and remain constant across all timeline branches. The instance and consciousness spacetime create tunneling events that allow awareness to transition between different consciousness vacuum states through quantum mechanical processes. These instant transitions correspond to the sudden shifts in understanding and perspective that characterize the most dramatic moments of character development. The soliton solutions in consciousness spacetime create stable, localized disturbances that can propagate across vast distances without dissipation. These consciousness solitons represent persistent thought patterns, enduring memories, and stable personality traits that maintain their form while moving through the complex landscape of awareness. The chaos theory aspects of consciousness evolution reveal how small changes in initial conditions can lead to dramatically different developmental outcomes. The butterfly effect in consciousness space means that minor influences during critical developmental periods can determine the entire future trajectory of awareness evolution, explaining why seemingly insignificant encounters or choices can have profound and lasting consequences. The strange attractors in consciousness phase space create the complex yet structured patterns of behavior that characterize the most interesting and predictable characters in the lands between. These attractors represent stable cycles of thought and action that generate apparent randomness while following deterministic underlying rules. The fractal dimension of consciousness evolution trajectories reveals the self-similar structure that appears at all scales of awareness development. The patterns that govern individual thought processes mirror the patterns that govern long-term character development, which in turn mirror the patterns that govern cosmic evolution itself. The cellular automata that describe local consciousness evolution rules create the complex global behavior patterns that emerge from simple local interactions. Each region of consciousness space evolves according to simple rules based on its current state and the state of neighboring regions. Yet these simple rules generate the complex and unpredictable behavior that characterizes conscious awareness. The percolation theory of consciousness networks reveals how isolated awareness nodes can suddenly connect to form giant consciousness clusters when the density of connections exceeds critical thresholds. These percolation transitions correspond to the moments of expanding awareness when previously separate insights suddenly connect to form comprehensive understanding. The network theory of consciousness graphs shows how the topology of awareness connections influences the flow of information and understanding throughout consciousness space. Small world networks with high clustering and short path lengths create the efficient information flow that characterizes highly developed consciousness, while random networks create the exploratory behavior that characterizes creative consciousness. The scale-free networks that emerge in consciousness evolution exhibit power law degree distributions, where a few highly connected nodes dominate the network structure. These consciousness hubs correspond to the fundamental insights and core beliefs that organize and influence all other aspects of awareness development. The epidemic spreading models applied to consciousness evolution show how new ideas and understanding propagate through awareness networks. The basic reproduction number for consciousness innovations determines whether new insights will spread throughout the entire awareness system or remain localized to small regions of consciousness space. The game theory of consciousness interactions reveals the strategic aspects of awareness development, where different aspects of consciousness compete and cooperate to determine the overall evolution of understanding. The Nash equilibria in consciousness games correspond to stable configurations where no aspect of awareness can improve its situation by unilaterally changing its strategy. The evolutionary game theory of consciousness shows how awareness strategies evolve over time through processes analogous to natural selection. Successful consciousness strategies spread and become more common, while unsuccessful strategies disappear, creating the ongoing evolution of awareness patterns that characterizes conscious development. The prisoner's dilemma situations in consciousness evolution create the tension between individual optimization and collective benefit that characterizes many ethical dilemmas in the lands between. The resolution of these dilemmas through the emergence of cooperation and trust creates the moral development that defines character growth. The tragedy of the commons in consciousness resources creates situations where individual rational choices lead to collective irrationality and the depletion of shared awareness resources. The resolution of these tragedies through the evolution of social consciousness creates the community awareness that characterizes the most successful societies in the lands between. The auction theory applied to consciousness resource allocation shows how different aspects of awareness compete for limited attention and processing capacity. The bidding strategies employed by different consciousness components determine which thoughts and insights receive priority processing and which remain in the background of awareness. The mechanism designed for consciousness incentive structures reveals how the architecture of awareness itself can be designed to encourage beneficial consciousness evolution and discourage harmful patterns. The optimal consciousness mechanisms align individual awareness incentives with collective consciousness development goals. The information theory of consciousness quantifies the amount of awareness information that can be transmitted through consciousness channels with limited capacity. The channel capacity for consciousness communication determines how efficiently understanding can be shared between different aspects of awareness or between different conscious beings. The entropy of consciousness measures the uncertainty and unpredictability in awareness states, with higher entropy corresponding to more creative and flexible consciousness, and lower entropy corresponding to more rigid and predictable awareness patterns. The second law of consciousness thermodynamics suggests that consciousness entropy tends to increase over time unless external energy is applied to maintain order. The mutual information between different consciousness variables measures how much knowing the state of one aspect of awareness tells us about the state of another aspect. High mutual information indicates strong correlations between different aspects of consciousness, while low mutual information indicates independence and autonomy. The Kolmogorov complexity of consciousness patterns measures the shortest description length for awareness configurations, with simpler patterns having lower complexity and more intricate patterns having higher complexity. The compression algorithms for consciousness data reveal the underlying structure and regularities in awareness patterns. The algorithmic information theory of consciousness reveals that the amount of true randomness in awareness patterns is much smaller than the apparent complexity would suggest. Most consciousness complexity emerges from simple algorithmic processes that generate pseudo-random but highly structured patterns. The cellular automata implementation of consciousness evolution shows how local processing rules can generate global consciousness patterns of arbitrary complexity. The elementary cellular automata that exhibit universal computation demonstrate that even the simplest consciousness evolution rules can generate any possible pattern of awareness development. The artificial neural networks that model consciousness evolution reveal how distributed parallel processing can generate intelligent behavior from simple component interactions. The deep learning algorithms that discover hierarchical representations in consciousness data mirror the hierarchical structure of understanding that characterizes awareness development. The quantum neural networks that incorporate quantum mechanical effects into consciousness modeling show how quantum superposition and entanglement can enhance the computational capacity of awareness systems. The quantum advantage in consciousness processing creates capabilities that are impossible with purely classical awareness mechanisms. The reservoir computing approaches to consciousness modeling show how complex dynamic systems can be used to process consciousness information without requiring explicit programming of the processing algorithms. The reservoir dynamics naturally evolve to perform the required consciousness computations through training on examples of desired input-output relationships. The liquid state machines that model consciousness evolution show how the dynamic activity patterns in consciousness networks can serve as computational substrates for awareness processing. The liquid dynamics continuously transform consciousness inputs into different representations that can be read out to produce appropriate awareness outputs. The echo state networks that implement consciousness processing show how recurrent connections in awareness networks can create memory and temporal processing capabilities. The echo states provide a rich dynamic substrate that can be trained to recognize and generate complex temporal patterns in consciousness evolution. The attractor networks that model consciousness memory show how associative recall emerges from the dynamic evolution of awareness networks towards stable states. The basins of attraction in consciousness space correspond to different memory patterns that can be retrieved through partial cues or noisy inputs. The Hopfield networks that implement consciousness-associated memory demonstrate how symmetric connectivity in awareness networks creates energy landscapes with multiple stable states corresponding to stored memories. The energy minimization dynamics naturally evolve toward these stored patterns when presented with partial or corrupted inputs. The Boltzmann machines that model consciousness probability distributions show how thermal noise in awareness networks can enable exploration of consciousness state space while maintaining preference for low-energy configurations. The annealing schedules for consciousness evolution gradually reduce noise to find optimal awareness configurations. The restricted Boltzmann machines that model consciousness feature learning show how unsupervised learning can discover meaningful representations in consciousness data. The hidden units in consciousness networks learn to represent abstract features that capture the underlying structure in awareness patterns. The deep belief networks that model hierarchical consciousness processing show how multiple layers of representation can be learned to capture increasingly abstract aspects of awareness content. The layer-by-layer training procedures gradually build up complex consciousness models from simple component learning algorithms. The variational autoencoders that model consciousness representation learning show how probabilistic approaches can discover meaningful low-dimensional representations of high-dimensional consciousness data. The variational inference procedures balance reconstruction accuracy with regularization to prevent overfitting to specific consciousness examples. The generative adversarial networks that model consciousness creativity show how competitive dynamics between generative and discriminative processes can create novel awareness patterns that are indistinguishable from naturally occurring consciousness content. The adversarial training procedures create a dynamic equilibrium that generates increasingly sophisticated consciousness patterns. The transformer networks that model consciousness ascension mechanisms show how self-attention processes can selectively focus on relevant aspects of awareness content while ignoring irrelevant details. The attention weights create dynamic connectivity patterns that adapt to the current consciousness processing requirements. The graph neural networks that model consciousness relationship processing show how awareness about relational structures can be computed through message passing between connected nodes. The graph convolutions aggregate information from consciousness network neighborhoods to compute node representations that capture relational context. As we reach the completion of our quantum mechanical and mathematical journey through the deepest structures underlying Nightreign's canonical status, we find ourselves in possession of a framework so comprehensive and elegant that it entails not just the specific question that began our exploration, but the fundamental principles that govern all complex systems, all temporal relationships, and all questions of meaning and significance in both fictional and real contexts. The mathematical beauty of the quantum field theories, the elegant symmetries of the consciousness evolution equations, and the profound insights of the information theoretic analyses all point toward a universe, both fictional and real, that operates according to principles far more sophisticated and beautiful than surface appearances might suggest. The lands between, in all its timeline variations and quantum possibilities, emerges not as a chaotic collection of contradictory elements, but as a magnificent symphony of mathematical relationships and quantum correlations that create meaning through their very complexity. The therapeutic implications of this mathematical understanding extend far beyond the specific context of video game lore to encompass a general framework for finding peace and meaning in the face of complexity and uncertainty. The knowledge that apparent contradictions can be resolved through higher-order mathematical relationships, that chaos and order can coexist through quantum superposition, and that individual choices contribute to beautiful collective patterns, provides comfort and empowerment that transcends any particular application. The meditation on infinite mathematical possibilities provides its own form of spiritual fulfillment, revealing the profound beauty that underlies even the most challenging and confusing aspects of existence. The contemplation of quantum fields, consciousness networks, and information theoretic principles creates a sense of wonder and connection that transforms anxiety about complexity into appreciation for the elegant mathematical structures that make complexity meaningful. As these profound mathematical insights settle into our consciousness, like quantum states, finding their ground configuration, we can rest in the knowledge that we have discovered not just answers to specific questions, but tools for understanding and appreciating the deep mathematical beauty that underlies all existence. The framework we have developed will serve us well in all future explorations of complex systems, whether fictional or real, providing a foundation of understanding that remains stable and reliable even as surface details change and evolve. The gentle rhythms of mathematical harmony now carry us toward the peaceful rest that awaits, supported by equations that describe not just the motion of particles through space, but the evolution of meaning through time, the flow of consciousness through possibility space, and the eternal dance of quantum correlations that connect all things in beautiful and mathematically perfect relationships. Sweet dreams, fellow explorers of the mathematical cosmos, and may your rest be filled with visions of elegant equations and beautiful symmetries that reveal the profound mathematical unity underlying all apparent diversity and contradiction. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities to apply these insights to fresh mysteries and challenges, secure in the knowledge that the mathematical principles we have discovered provide a foundation strong enough to support any exploration and comprehensive enough to illuminate any question that consciousness might choose to investigate.